Hello all and welcome back to the channel. The first video of 2021. Happy New Year to you all. So this is a video that I've been wanting to do for a while now, but especially in response to a fellow called Kevin, who recently commented on the video on cycle of fourths, where he was questioning why it was called a perfect fourth if the actual number of semitones was 5. And it kind of makes sense. It's numerically, it doesn't really sort of add up. So this video we're going to take a look through exactly what all these intervals are within the range of an octave. So just looking at all the intervals, how they're named, an easy way to derive them, an easy way to work out what the interval is between any two notes, and to look at the number of semitones involved with each of those to hopefully make this a little bit simpler. So to start off with, we're going to dive into MuseScore and just have a little listen to what we're going to begin with, which is our C major scale, just to use that as a start point for trying to work out what these intervals are. So here we are in MuseScore, and as I say, we've got a C major scale which I've placed here, so from this C here to this C an octave higher. And what we're going to look at is the distance between the starting C and each successive note of the scale. So for example here, this C to this D, we refer to as a major second. So the best way to think about that is we're moving from the first step of the scale to the second step of the scale. And we call it a major second because it comes out of the major scale. That's not the actual reason for why they're named what they are, but it's a really good way of remembering it if you just think about the major scale. So from C to D, or the first to the second step, we refer to as a major second. Now that is 2 semitones, and we'll come back to look at that in a little bit. If we were to go from the C to the E, we'd refer to this as a major third. We're moving from the tonic, or the first note of the scale, to the third note of the scale, and again, it's the third as it would be in a major scale. If it was an E flat, that's the third as it would be in a minor scale, and hence we'd call it a minor third. But again, we're going to come back to those in a little while. We're just going to look at the major scale to start off with. Things get a little bit different when we get to the fourth. So from the C to the F, which gives us our perfect fourth, not a major fourth. Why it's called perfect, why certain intervals are referred to as perfect, is kind of beyond the scope of what we're going to look at today. Just to know that there are mathematical relationships between these notes, and some of them are more closely related than others, and I'll just leave it at that. There is a much better explanation for it that I might get into in another video, but let's not confuse things for the moment. So from this case, the C to the F, or the tonic, or the first note of the scale, to the fourth, we refer to as a perfect fourth. From the first to the fifth, we also refer to as a perfect interval. This is the perfect fifth, so C to G in this case. From the first note to the sixth note, we refer to as the major sixth. From the first note to the seventh note, we refer to as a major seventh. And finally, from the first note to the octave higher, we refer to as a perfect octave. Just to complete the whole picture, if you had a C being played alongside another C of the same pitch, those two notes still have what is referred to as an interval, even though there is no real distance between them, and we refer to it as a perfect unison. So just to reflect, or just to go back over that, and we'll swap over to the whiteboard in a second and look at this more closely, but our perfect intervals are the perfect unison, where we have two pitches on the same note, the perfect fourth, in this case C to F, the perfect fifth, in this case C to G, and the perfect octave, C to the C an octave higher. And then we have our major intervals, C to D, which is the major second, C to E, which is the major third, C to A, which is the major sixth, and C to B, which is the major seventh. Okay, we'll take a look back over on the whiteboard now and just have a look at the number of semitones between all these. And I'm going to come back to MuseScore and show you a way you can identify any interval given a couple of notes. Okay, so let's take a look at the number of semitones between each of these notes as another way of identifying them. So we said that the first to the second in the major scale we refer to as the major second, and it is 2 semitones. Everything kind of makes sense at this point. It's a major second, 2 semitones. When we get to the next note though, things start to change. So from the C to the E we refer to as the major third, but it's actually 4 semitones. The perfect fourth carries on this pattern because we have a situation where the number of semitones, being 5, doesn't relate to the number that we would use to determine the interval. And this carries on all the way to the octave. So when we get to the perfect fifth, we have 7 semitones. When we get to the major sixth, we have 9. When we get to the major seventh, we have 11. And then finally, at the perfect octave, we have 12. So the number of semitones doesn't relate directly to what we refer to as the the size of the interval. If you want a way of referring that back to a pattern, the best way to think about it is, as we have done already, use the major scale as an example. So in the major scale, all the intervals from the root C in this case to every other step of the scale will either be major or perfect. Perfect for the unison, the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, and the perfect octave, and major for the others. So how do we find the other notes in the 12-note chromatic scale that aren't represented in this major scale? For example, we have no E flat, we have no D flat, we have no F sharp or G flat, we have no A flat, we have no B flat. So there's a number of notes that we're missing out of the chromatic scale, but we can also refer to them as intervals. So to do that, we'll go back to MuseScore and see how we can modify the scale to show those intervals. Okay, so back in MuseScore, we have this situation where from the first to the second, we've called this the major second. But of course, there is a note in between, which is the D flat. If it's a D flat in this case, this is only a single semitone now, and we refer to that as a minor second. The best way to think about this is all of your minor intervals are just the major intervals dropped by a semitone. So your major second becomes a minor second when we flatten it. If we look at the E here, if we flatten that a semitone, that becomes the minor third, and it's only 3 semitones instead of the 4 it was for the major. We do the same thing for the 6th. This becomes a minor 6th. For the 7th, becomes a minor 7th. So just any of the major intervals, if you reduce them by a semitone, they become the minor equivalent. The one that's a little bit awkward is the one in the middle here. So if we took this perfect fourth and raised it up a step, this is now referred to as an augmented fourth. Okay, there are no major fourths or minor fourths. So we have an augmented fourth, which is the perfect fourth raised a semitone. The same note, F sharp, can also be written as G flat, and we would do that by lowering the 5th step. So this, what was the perfect 5th, now becomes the diminished 5th. So that essentially covers all of the notes that we haven't looked at already. So C to our D flat would be our minor second, C to D will be our major second, C to E flat will be the minor third, C to E will be the major third, C to F is the perfect fourth, C to F sharp is the augmented fourth, which is the same thing as the diminished 5th, if we make it a G flat instead of an F sharp. Then we have the minor 6th, C to A flat, the major 6th of C to A, the minor 7th of C to B flat, the major 7th of C to B, and then finally the perfect octave. So that's how you refer to all of those. So how do we use that to work out the distance between any two notes? The easiest way to do this is temporarily put yourself in the key of the lowest note. So let's look at some examples. Okay, so in this example we have two notes. We've got an F and we've got a B flat. And to determine the distance between these two notes intervallically, we're going to think about what the lowest pitch is and temporarily put ourselves in that key. So our lowest note is an F. So the key signature for F major is 1 flat, B flat. So the first thing we're going to do is just count up the spaces or lines, or count up the alphabet. We'll do the same thing to work out what the distance is numerically between these two notes. So F is 1, G is 2, A is 3, B is 4. So we know with some kind of fourth. What we need to work out is whether that's a perfect fourth or an augmented fourth. In this case, we know it's a perfect fourth because the B is flat in F major. So that would be the note that would be in the F major scale, F, G, A, B flat. So we know that's a perfect fourth. If, for example, this had been F to B, we could do the same thing. So first of all, let's count up the letters. F is 1, G is 2, A is 3, B is 4. But the problem we have is the B is flat in the F major scale, but in this case, it's a B natural. So that fourth has been raised a semitone, so we know this is an augmented fourth. So let's look at this as an example. We've got a D here as the bottom note and a C as our top note. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to temporarily put ourselves in the key of D. So in the key of D, we have two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. So we know that this C would normally be sharp in the D major scale. So we know that it's not going to be a major or a perfect interval straight away because it wouldn't fit in the D major scale. First thing to do is count up the letters, figure out the size of the interval numerically. So D is 1, E is 2, F is 3, G is 4, A is 5, B is 6, and C is 7. So we know it's a seventh of some kind. And because we know that the seventh step of D major should be C sharp, we know that this has been lowered by a semitone. So instead of it being a major seventh, this is a minor seventh. Okay, so again, just to refresh on that, D to C, C must be sharp in the D major scale. We know this is flat by 1 degree or 1 semitone, so as a result of that, it must be a minor seventh. Just a final little trick here to give you a bit of help when you're trying to work out the size of an interval numerically, and as a bit of a double check to sort of help you make sure that you've got the right number. There's an interesting thing that happens when you look at intervals on the stave. So in this case, we had a D to a C. We identified it as a minor seventh. One of the things you can use to quickly check this is if the two notes are on the same thing. In other words, if this note is on a space and this note is on a space, you know that numerically the size of the interval must be an odd number. Here's your third, where things are on the same thing, a space and a space. Fifth, seventh. Yeah, so that's one thing we can use. If we looked at the other example we had before, where we had F and B flat, we know this is going to be some kind of even interval because the two notes are on different things. Anyway, I hope that's been useful. As you see, the determining of intervals is not that difficult. Using the major scale as a basis for it is a really good place to start. There are some other tricks that you can use when it comes to intervals, for example, inverting intervals and things like that. We're going to look at that in some future videos on intervals, but this is just to get you started into identifying the ranges of intervals or identifying intervals within the range of an octave, how we derive them, whether they're known as major, minor, or perfect, and the number of semitones that you can use as well. The semitone count thing is a way of doing it. I don't recommend it. Get into the habit of thinking about being in a certain key to determine it. It'll strengthen up your key recognition skills at the same time, which is a really important skill to have. It's really good to be able to place yourself on a root note and instantly see what the key signature is for that, because you will instantly see what that note is above. You'll instantly see the interval. If you expect it to be a C sharp and it's not, well, you know it's lowered a semitone. It's not a major interval, it's a minor. That's as an example. Anyway, as I say, I hope it's been useful. Please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the little notification bell as well, which I haven't said before, but I have now. There's also a Discord channel. It's in very, very early stages, but we'd love to see some more people there. I think there's only about 3 of us, so you'll be in a very, very select group. Yeah, we'd love to see you there as well. So I hope that's been useful. Enjoy your music and speak to you soon.